Hello, welcome back to Learn Economia. In this video, we are going to discuss the concept of Coase theorem. We'll be discussing the concept by explaining its meaning. Also, we'll be looking into the assumptions of Coase theorem. We also look into the examples of Coase theorem to make you familiarize with the concept with ease. The graphical illustrations with respect to this particular topic would also be discussed in this video. Apart from these, applications as well as limitations of this particular topic would be discussed here. So let's get started. Coming to the idea of Coase theorem, we can see that this particular theory or this particular theorem involves issuing of property rights. So as per this theorem, issuing property rights could solve negative externalities. You would be knowing what negative externalities. I have already discussed the concept of externality in several videos which we have discussed. So I'll be providing the links of these videos in the description box. So for those people who are not familiar with the concept, could get familiar with the same. So if you take, for instance, if a forester have to manage the forest to ensure its longevity and protect it from fires, then there is a kind of incentive to do this kind of protection in order to be able to sell logs in future years, right? So the paper brought by Coase, Ronald Coase, was something which plays a very important role in the theory and discussion of economics. So this particular theory was coined by who is known as Ronald Coase, and it was in his 1960 paper that he put forward his theory, and the paper was titled as a problem with social cause. So the paper which was titled as the problem of social cause contains what is known as a Coase theorem. Okay. In this particular contribution, what Coase is trying to do is that he tries to explain that property right could be something which become conflicting. So as a result, it would lead to inefficient economic results. Okay, so when property rights are not clearly defined, then there would be disputes in the economy. So this is a background of the theory, and by discussing the background, let's go to the assumptions of the theory. So what we would do is that we would be discussing each or every assumption in detail. So first is at no transaction cost. This is a basic and important assumption to this particular theory. It says that there is no transaction cost. So when I say there is no transaction cost, it means that the transaction cost means that it is the cost of identifying accepted partners or trading partners. Okay, so here in the example we have taken, the farmer would have to find I have already discussed this example in some of the videos I have given, so I don't want to go to that again, but I am going to explain that example again. Okay, so just for instance, you can see that there is a farmer. Okay, and this farmer, what he is doing is that he is he would have to find fisheries downstream in order to bargain with them. So why? Because we in the previous example we in the previous example we could see that there property rights plays a very important role, but in usual case property rights are not clearly defined. As a result, it would be causing disputes, right? So there is a if you have to go for bargaining, there should be some kind of agreement, and uh, and that means that there is some kind of legal fees, and when there is legal fees arising, that would add to your transaction cost. As a result, we also have complaints. Okay, so the fisher, he might want to monitor how much fertilizer the farmer is using to ensure that he stays within the agreement, which is another transaction cost. So what Coase is telling is that for Coase theorem to exist, there cannot be these transaction costs, otherwise economic efficiency is not achieved. So he is assuming there is no transaction cost. Now, next assumption is that perfect information. You might be knowing the meaning of perfect information. There would be two parties, so both would be sharing equal information. That there is information symmetry. So without perfect information, the social optimal point would not be achieved. Uh, Especially two parties won't be achieving social optimal point. Okay, and as a result, we might be going towards it, but we won't reach it. That is the situation. And why this happening is because without perfect information, both parties would be unable to determine the value. So if you look into the case of the farmer's example, we can see that if the farmer does not know how much of impact having his fertilizer, if he is using fertilizer and how much impact his fertilizer is causing, he is unable to value it efficiently and effectively. So the farmer would always try to use the same amount of fertilizer. Okay, so the value here we place is likely to be wide of the mark, as there is no indicative idea. The result here is that economically inefficient result. So there would be pollution caused by the fertilizer, and which would dramatically vary from the true value. So as per Coase, he is a person who had assumed that farmer and all other parties in the economy have information on the value of externalities caused by fertilizers. And as a result, they would know the individual cost as a result of adding fertilizer. Next, equal market power, another assumption. So the Coase theorem, it assumes that the fisher as well as the farmer, the fisher who is fishing the downstream and the farmer who is adding the fertilizer, both would be having equal powers. Okay, so just take the example of Walmart. Walmart is going to have great negotiating power with small farmer, because why? Because Walmart is a big business, right? So a small farmer is a small person with respect to his income, with respect to his efficiency, all these kinds of things. So here there is some kind of inequality, right? This is very much common in the economy, and we can see that socially optimal point cannot be reached as negotiations are skewed, especially it is skewed in favor of the stronger party. As a result, the weaker side has value of externality undervalued. Okay, and this means that at a net loss when compared to a comparative gain of another party. So in Coase theorem, we can see that the power of property right to work is assumed that both parties would have equal market power, but just think this is something which is very much uncommon in our economy. It is not something which is common to have equal market power for both the parties. So this is very much difficult to achieve. Having discussed the case, just go to an example. That is, um, uh, uh, we are going to discuss an example where Coase theorem could be applied. Okay, so there is a business, and a business, just assume that there's a business and this business would pollute the river. Okay, and those who benefit from benefit from walking past the river and enjoying the scenic beauty and all, they would be facing negative externalities, because the river would be polluted by a business, and as a result of this pollution, the people who are passing by the river would be suffering from the negative externality caused by the business. So there would be bottles, plastic bottles, some other items, waste materials, all these things would be in the river, making the view of the river unpleasant. Neither the business nor the individual owns the river. So the river is not a property of either the business or the people who would be passing by the passing by the river. So what result is a negative cost to the individual who pass by the river? We do not see we may then see lawsuits. I mean, these people can go to the court and they could file a case and deal with the issue. But this is something which would take a long number of years. As per Coase theorem, in these kinds of situations, it is more efficient for property right to be clearly defined and for both parties to bargain instead. So, but in these cases, a river, as you all know, it is something which is not owned by a particular person. It is something which is assumed to be or it is which is something which is considered to be a common property. Although there is there are many people who take advantages of rivers in the economy, but this is something that is not an individual property. So we can see that this is based on the assumption that there are no transaction costs. For instance, there may be legal cost which would add to the transaction cost, but we are assuming that there is no transaction cost. So there would be some agreement. As a part of the agreement, the business might own the right to pollute the river. If the business is owning the right to pollute the river, then the business can go on polluting the river. But the people who are passing by the river, if they have the right to the river, then they can tell the business not to pollute the river. If you pollute, then there would be some legal actions coming in. So as a result, the business won't be polluting the river, and the people who walk by the river can walk by without suffering from pollution. So it would therefore benefit the business to reduce pollution in order to obtain income from individuals. So and again we can take the example. The Coase theorem is based on actually assigned rights with help align the true economic value. So when property rights are not assigned, what would happen? We have already seen what would happen if this person, I mean, if since the river is a common property, everyone can do whatever they wished with respect to this river. So when property rights are not assigned, we see an inefficient allocation of resources, and as a result, there will be many types of pollution, air pollution, water pollution, etc., in our economy. So all these kinds of things are known as negative externality. When these kinds of negative externalities occur, Coase theorem states that they can be prevented. How these can be prevented? This can be prevented by assigning property rights and then allowing both parties to bargain. In other words, these theorems suggest that negative externalities could be resolved as a result of assigning property rights, which is the best example to solve the issue. So just go back to the example of a farmer and the person who is using the water downstream. I mean, a farmer who is adding fertilizer to the river and the person who is using the water downstream by fishing. So what here happens is that the fertilizer would flow to the downstream and would negatively affect the fishing community in the downstream. So other members downstream might be affected. Other members who are using the water in the downstream would be affected. And in this case, the farmer is causing negative externality to the fishers, right? So the cost of these kinds of things these are something which cannot be calculated, and as a result, the Coase theorem is something which gains importance in recent years. Without clearly defined property rights, a farmer as well as a fisher could become they would become entwined in a long court battle to determine who has a right. And this kind of legal matters would cost a lot for both the farmer as well as for the fisher, right? So Coase has proposed a solution. He says that just assign property rights. If you assign the property rights, that would allow both the parties to negotiate, and this would thereby attribute a true economic cost to the pollution. If the farmer has defined divisible and defendable property right, then they own the right to use pesticides because it is his river, so he can use pesticides, and the negative externality will cost to the fisher. On the other hand, if both parties have to negotiate, then it would be worth to reduce or diminish negative externality, and definitely the entire cost of externality could be reduced. So the fisher would pay the farmer, however much it's worth to allow them to fish. So that may be either $50 or either $100 or either $1,000. So it depends. It depends upon how they are negotiating. So here the price is determined by the value the farmer has to forego by reducing the amount of fertilizers they use. Reducing the amount of fertilizers might reduce crop yield, and that would negatively influence the farmer. Also, on the other hand, if you look the same thing from the fisher's point of view, if the fisher on the river, then the farmer would have to compensate the fisher, and this would depending upon how much pollution the fertilizer is causing, how much fertilizer gets washed into the water, all these kinds of things. So the idea behind Coase theorem is that value would be placed on the negative externality. So if the farmer wants to use the fertilizer, then he must pay the owner of the land, which in case the fisher. I mean, it all depends upon who has the property right. If the farmer has the property right, then he can pollute the river. But if the fisher has the property right, the farmer should get sanction from the fisher before polluting. So this is a case just to give you just to give you the picture. So when the fisher owns a river, the farmer pays the fisher to be able to use fertilizer. That would be polluting the river, right? So when the farmer owns the river, the fisher pays the farmer to stop using so much fertilizer, so there are more fish in the water. That's it. Coming to the graphical illustration of Coase theorem, here we are measuring fertilizer use in the x-axis and marginal effect of externality on the y-axis. So this graphical illustration is to make you better understand the topic. As we can see from the chart, we have negative externality, the fertilizer use, etc. on the x-axis, and the marginal effect of externality on the both parties on the y-axis. Okay, and the reason you can see that both lines are downward sloping, and the reason for the same is that there comes a point where adding extra fertilizer into the river cannot do any more damage than it already has. So just see how it is working. At the same time, we can say that the marginal benefit slope to it goes to Q2, which refers to the point where there is no additional benefit to the farmer of using more fertilizer. Okay, you can see that the marginal damage as well as the marginal benefit, both these lines are sloping downward. And also you could see that at point Q1 both these lines intersect, which is the optimal point, and that means that both the marginal benefit and the marginal damage both are equal, and that way the farmer can produce up to the point by which the fisher is willing to accept and pay to use the river. That's it. So when property rights do not exist, what happens is that the farmer would produce up to the point Q2. Okay, when there is no property rights, he would be polluting the river up to Q2, and there is until no further benefit in using more fertilizer. That's the point. That is the optimal point for the farmer, and that way the fisher loses all his welfare, and his loss of welfare is between Q1 and Q2. And Q1 is the equilibrium point, and Q2 is the maximum limit up to which the farmer can pollute the river, and as a result the fisher would be losing, and that is losing a lot, and that is shown by the area between Q1 and Q2. Okay, so the damage that is caused between the equilibrium and the actual point that the farmer produces to, and that is the loss of the fisher. Now just allocate property right to the farmer, then what would happen? As per Coase theorem, this would mean that there are no transaction costs, property rights are well defined and are enforceable. So when property rights are allocated, there would be bargaining, and in this case fisher can now bargain with the farmer as to how much fertilizer to use. So the fisher would prefer the farmer to change production from Q2, which is a maximum, to Q1. So if the person is reducing the production to Q1, then that would be the equilibrium point, which is a socially optimal point. But you can see that this will mean that Fisher now gains the amount of welfare shaded in blue color. So blue color is a gain for the Fisher, because the farmer has reduced his use of fertilizer from Q2 to Q1. At the same time, farmer loses out from shifting his production from Q2 to Q1. Now his production also has reduced. Farmer's production has reduced as a result of using less fertilizer. And Q2 to Q1, and this also shows the loss of output to the farmer. And less fertilizer means low crops. Now again we can see that what can we tell from the two charts above, and that is here you can see one chart, and earlier we have seen another chart. So this means that in the previous one the marginal damage line and the area between Q1 and Q2. So here is greater than the value to the farmer as per the chart above, right? So here we can see that the Fisher, he is the one who gains more from the transaction from the farmer. In turn, Fisher is willing to pay farmer more than his losses, yet less than his gain. So both parties will be better off, and we reach a socially optimal point of production, which is Q1. And what would be the case if we could see that there is a Pareto improvement? And when there is a Pareto improvement, at least one person is getting better off, right, without making the other person worse off. And this is where both the parties are better off and all externalities are internalized. So the market is working efficiently. Why it is working efficiently? We have allotted property rights. So with by discussing all these kinds of things, now we can discuss the applications of Coase theorem. So this particular theorem, it could be explained to situations where economic activities of one party could impose some kind of damage on the other party. That is, economic activities by one party would cause some damages, or here we are dealing with the negative externalities, so we are dealing with damages, cost, all these kinds of things for the other party. That is, negative externalities is cost. Now as per Coase theorem, market will solve externalities by itself unless property rates are incomplete, negotiating is costly, or there are many other, or if there are many other problems. So we are not going into the details of those things. Just consider that the situation when property rights are incomplete and negotiating is costly. Okay. So what are the limitations of this particular topic of Coase theorem? First of all, bargaining is very difficult. Every time it is not possible. Coase theorem is something which rely a lot upon efficient and effective bargaining between the two parties in order to attain the socially optimal level of production. But every time, as we all know, it is something which might be very much difficult, and the individual might be having more experience in negotiating. One individual would be having more experience, whereas the other party might not be much aware of the same thing. So as a result, it is very much difficult to obtain the socially optimal point. So Coase theorem states that property rights can improve economic outcomes, the assumption that bargaining powers is equal. So that is not the case with the real world. Now, next point, transaction costs are almost never zero. Here, cost assumes that transaction cost is zero, but as we have discussed in the example itself, we have seen that there might be many costs like legal costs, some other costs to bribe some political party member or something, to convince the person who is polluting the river. So there would be some kind of transaction cost. One party might be incurring a lot of transaction cost. So as a result, chances are very high that this transaction cost get reflected in the bargaining activity as well. So as a result, that may lead to some inefficient results, not that would not lead to socially optimal results. We might be having legal fees, we might be having some other kinds of transportation cost, or we might be having some other kinds of transaction cost. Anyway, there will be different types of costs which would add to the transaction cost. So we cannot assume that transaction costs are zero. Next, distribution of income is affected. If the farmer is on the river, the fisher must pay him. Pay him to use the river. At the same time, if the fisher is on the river, then it would be the farmer that has to make a payment. The issue occurs when we decide who owns the property right, and will it be issued to the highest bidder. So those who have the highest amount of wealth are able to dictate the cost of externality. So that's the case. That is why we have we have discussed the example between Walmart and a poor person. Next, unlikely assumptions. There are a number of assumptions that we have used in the cost theorem, and that included no transaction cost, equal bargaining power, perfect information, etc. But when we look deep into all these kinds of assumptions, we could see that all these kinds of assumptions are difficult to work in real life. So that's all for cost theorem. Please like, share and subscribe to this channel for more videos, and you can be a part of my Telegram channel and Telegram group to discuss your doubts. And also, if you want me to do any of the videos which you are facing, where you are facing difficulties, then please do comment that in the comment box, so I can take it up from there. I'll be definitely picking it up from there. So also you can join my Telegram channel and Telegram group to discuss your doubts. I'll be providing the links of these in the description box. That's all for today. Thank you for watching. Thank you.